Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, and that's all you need to know. Monday, November 30th, the last day of November of 2020. We're getting close to the end of 2020. That is nice. I think we'll enjoy that. Of course, the end of January 2021 is where we really need to get to. But if you're holding your breath, you might just make it. So keep it up. It's really not doctor recommended or anything like that. And I don't pretend to be a doctor, but if you'd like, well, why don't I just start? As a matter of fact, everyone always just says that. I don't pretend to be a doctor. Well, I do. I pretend to be a doctor. Don't hold your breath. Like, literally, just not really a good idea to do it between now and January 21st. Not even in small intervals, quite honestly. I think you should just breathe for the most part. Unless you're enveloped by a toxic cloud. All right, well, this doctor stuff is too complicated for me. I'm going to stop playing, I guess. Greg Dworkin can do that if he likes, and he doesn't even have to play at it. He's also got a gigantic raft of stories, I think. I don't know, it just seems like there was an awful lot that he's been racking up, waiting in the wings in Skype, so it looks to be an exciting recap of the weekend. The weekend itself, I felt like it was mostly pretty quiet. Trump kind of busied himself with his conspiracy theory stuff. He played golf a lot. I don't know if he was there again on Sunday, but I think he may have gone every day over the holiday weekend, which is okay. Who cares at this point? Although I think what he's doing at this point is realizing that he is lost and that his presidency is coming to an end, though he doesn't admit it publicly. He basically spent his time playing with all the toys that the presidency still affords him. But also, his first love, golf, comes first. And so basically it was playing with the toys that allow him to play golf at taxpayer expense, of course, as many more times as he can get away with before it's all over, I suppose. And so this involved utilizing the Camp David facilities, which I don't think he likes a great deal, but everybody, on his way out the door, I think the family says, let's all go to Camp David, that presidential place, a couple more times. Then, now that we can still hang out there, and then pretty soon we won't be allowed there anymore, so let's go use it. And, it was awkward and odd, including the fact that I guess he sent the extended family out to Camp David for Thursday evening's Thanksgiving dinner. And he stayed in the White House with Melania and Barron, as it turns out, which is nice for the three of them to have a dinner. And it was interesting that I guess it's as close as he came to setting an example for the rest of the country of what you're supposed to be doing during this COVID-19 Thanksgiving, and had a small, I guess you could call it intimate, although I have no idea what the intimacy level really was, in his, in the dining room in the residential quarters of the White House. It's a lot easier to do. I know everybody experienced this weekend the difficulties, perhaps, of cooking a large meal for a small number of people, but of course, he's got staff. We paid for them to do that job for him. So who knows what he did, and he probably had some hamburgers and didn't even bother with the turkey. I don't know whether he likes turkey or not. But the extended family was up in Camp David, which I did see. I saw a couple of complaints about. Apparently, I don't know whether there's protocol for the use of Camp David or not. Like, people were complaining, like, it's not a timeshare that the president can just lend out to people. If he's on vacation, he can go, and if his family comes with him, that's fine. I don't see any real problem with sending them up there, except that they're, grubbers and grifters, and I don't like that a whole lot. But sending the family ahead, knowing that he was going to show up on Friday, or perhaps Thursday evening after the dinner, I don't know what his exact plans were, that seemed okay to me. But I think the real goal was for him to be able to play golf in the morning, on Friday morning. Although I think he may have played Thursday morning as well. Maybe they even went up there on Wednesday. Who knows? But he played golf, and then I guess he took the helicopter straight out of the golf course out to Camp David. And then he took the helicopter straight back the next morning to play again. And this time I saw photos of Eric and Don Jr. getting off the helicopter with them, oddly dressed in identical, I don't know, like future wear. I don't know what the heck they were trying to do, what they were supposed to look like, but they were dressed up as twinsies, and that's cute, and it's nice that they have that brotherly thing. I think they were wearing jackets with the presidential seal on them, but they did look like they came out of some sort of science fiction movie where everybody in the future wears uniforms for some reason. I'm not really, I guess that's supposed to mean that it's a dystopian dictatorship. So, might not be a future thing at all, I suppose. Could be just modern day thing. Anyway, they flew back and forth. Once again, my complaints will have to go out to the Virginia Department of Health and the Loudoun County Department of Health. I just don't understand how this licensed business, this golf course, is okay with patrons flying back and forth on helicopters with people who are COVID positive and who are supposed to be isolating. That would be Don Jr., of course. He should still be in his isolation, but instead he was spreading his coronavirus to the staff at Camp David as a parting gift for them. Thanks for allowing us to come in here and play around and have you clean up after us. And then, I don't know, the president bounced back and forth between the golf course and Camp David for a while, every once in a while sprinkling his Twitter timeline with more conspiracy theory threads and threats of filing more lawsuits. Meanwhile, the newspaper's reporting that he was allegedly sort of coming around to maybe doing as much of a concession as he could possibly do by allowing the transition to go forward. Big piece over the weekend in the Washington Post about the supposed insider accounts of how he was walking around the White House muttering, "I won, I won, I won." So lots of interesting things to catch up on, but I thought he kept it relatively, either he was relatively quiet or we're learning finally to ignore him, and I don't know which one. It could be a combination of both. Both are pretty good.
Yeah, why not both?
Yeah, but Greg was watching closely, so why not both of us talk at the same time, as a matter of fact. I'll get out of your way. How about that, Greg? Good morning.
Well,
how were you? How was your weekend?
My weekend was fine.
That's good.
The last show I
up.
did was Thursday morning, so we had Thanksgiving later that afternoon.
Yes, okay. That went well.
And, we did the traditional, now traditional as far as this year, Zoom call with the family.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was fun because, first of all, my niece set it up so I didn't have to, which made the Zoom call a lot easier. Yes. And we had 9 families on the Zoom call, so it was totally symmetric,
wow.
And I was a secret square in the middle, which is always nice. But on those Zoom calls, the squares change sometimes as people shift, and it's really disconcerting when you think you're talking to a square, and it turns out the square just moves over to the upper left, and then, now it's down the right.
It's kind of odd.
Yeah. It's all kind of odd. The other odd thing, of course, this is a personal thing. I looked back at the 9 families, nieces, nephews, kids, and realized I'm the third oldest of the family. Actually, I guess in Washington terms, the second in line to be oldest.
Oh, okay.
Which is how they say it, right?
Make you a patriarch soon?
Yeah, the first in line is actually the second. The vice president is first in line.
Yes, right. That's true.
And then Nancy Pelosi is third in succession, but second in line, because the president himself is actually first in line. So it was good to see family, and that made the whole weekend sort of moderately quiet. I think you're right. I think it is a combination of both. Trump has lost, and a week from tomorrow, I guess, is the safe harbor day. Beyond which you can't influence the legislatures even though you want to. And whereas there's still a lot of noise about that, it isn't really threatening anymore. And so when you see and hear Trump, you don't go, oh, my God, this is like sending shivers up my spine, fascism, and what if it works? It's not working. It's not going to work.
Good.
It's like this is getting boring. And what it is doing is turning over the rocks, and you see which Republicans scramble out who are totally okay with fascism and anti-democracy, and which aren't. So I guess that's useful in a sort of way.
Yeah,
but it's not really going to. It doesn't feel like it's going to change anything, and so it just doesn't have the threat that dictators need in order to succeed.
Yes, well, it does feel a little less threatening as each of the courts rule, as each of the states certify, as safe harbor looms. There's less and less out there that's not supposed to happen, that could still happen, or that you say, well, it could be a toss-up with a judge, It's all becoming clearer.
No, because even when the individual judges say, well, this doesn't really have merit, but there's enough merit, so I think I'll put it on hold and not just completely throw it out. And then the next judge up says, well, we appealed it. No, it's getting thrown out. I mean, that's basically what's happened. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm telling you that's what it looks like.
Yeah, well, it is happening that way. And you should always remember that there are judges out there that can make problems or decide law is stupid. And so watch out for those guys.
Well, it's not always completely dumb. I mean, sometimes they'll just say, well, there's this one point that I think really needs settled. The rest of the case is garbage, and I'm not doing what you asked because it's crazy. But this one point is kind of interesting. And the next judge says, nah, it's not even interesting.
That happens. Yeah.
That happens in Pennsylvania apparently a lot.
Yes, right. Well, they did a good job with it in Pennsylvania.
So it's fun, as you point out, watching Don Jr. and Eric compete to see who's Fredo. And, it's kind of touching watching them come to grips with the fact that their father has lost the election and they don't have the protection and the whole cachet that goes with being the president's children, because that's going to be gone, and they're kind of wrestling with that. And they keep plaintively tweeting things like, I can't believe that Biden actually got more than 80 million votes. I can't believe that this guy won. I can't believe that Trump lost.
I don't know what's so hard about it.
And James Surowiecki and David Frum were talking about this morning, because this keeps coming up in Fox and Friends all the time. But what if they go to it's obviously they're not going to win in courts, and now they have to go to the state legislatures and try to convince them. Will it work? Well, we'll just have to see. Of course it won't work, and after a week we won't even do that. But James Surowiecki writes, the other thing that's always left out of these how could Trump have lost threads is that Trump lost the popular vote by millions of votes in 2016 too. So most people who voted in 2016 didn't vote for Trump. It's hardly puzzling that the same thing happened in 2020. And David Frum chimes in and says, literally every single day of Trump's presidency, a majority of Americans disapproved of him. Trump was the most consistently unpopular first-term president in the history of opinion polling. And it's not complicated. Trump lost because a rock-solid American majority disliked and disapproved of him every single day since an electoral college fluke installed him in the presidency despite 3 million vote margin against him in 2016. And Rosie Rifka chimes in and says, look at today's Gallup poll. Biden's favorability rises to 55 and Trump dips to 42, which is, part and parcel of a whole way of thinking we're not used to yet. And some of us won't allow ourselves to think that way until January 20th. But after Trump is not president anymore, after it's clear he's a loser, after it's clear he's a one-term president despite trying to rig the election in his favor with subsidies to farmers in Iowa and writing his name on checks that went to the American people that kept the economy afloat because of what the Democrats did in the CARES Act that Republicans went along with. Remember, according to the modern media, whenever Congress screws up, it's Congress's fault.
Right.
But whenever Congress does something, it's the Republicans.
Yes, they allow it.
Right. But Democrats never pass anything, and they never mention that the reason Congress doesn't get anything done is because the Republicans in Congress don't get anything done. So, you had all of that. That's fading, and we're actually getting into a bad period before the good period. The bad period being the virus spread and the subsidies from the government running out. And, I think people are really going to start feeling it. And, of course, that's part of the Trump plan. As long as he has any say in it, he wants things to screw up so Biden looks bad. And that's, only going to work temporarily, I think, because then what happens is vaccine comes and the economy gets better and a lot of things get better. And Biden will be president, and he'll take credit for that. Just Trump is already talking about, I'm not even going to the inaugural. I'm going to start running for 2024 on the same day. And my point is, after January 20th, to the chagrin of the Trump children, nobody's going to care. You can write all you want to about, he still controls this part of it. No, he really doesn't. And I think the thing to look at, Donnie Deutsch was going on about this on Morning Joe this morning, but I think he's right. The assumption that Trump has an iron hold, an iron grip on the party is true until January 21st, and then we'll have to see what happens. But watch what's happening in Georgia. Right. I think that's your best guide to how that's working. Okay, because
good point.
The Georgia Republican Party right now is split. and the Democrats are
disarray.
united. Ossoff and Warnock are running together. They're embracing everybody from Joe Biden to Bernie Sanders, but especially Joe Biden. They are making a play by working hard to earn the black vote in Georgia, without which Democrats cannot win. And meanwhile, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue have all sorts of issues with
Mostly
their stock performance.
Yeah.
I sent you a headline from the Savannah Morning News this morning. It's the first thing on the list I sent you, and I circled it. With U.S. in panic, Purdue saw stock opportunity. That's what Savannah, Georgia's reading this morning.
Oh, boy.
And so the race is going to be against two crooks. And I don't know that the Democrats will win, but they certainly have a excellent chance to do that, given the fact that the Republican Party is riven, and they can't even decide whether or not it's a good idea for Trump to go down and campaign. Half the party wants him, the other half doesn't.
Vote. Yeah, they've got. Plus, they have their lunatics saying we should boycott the election. I don't know what you hope to do with that, but I hope you try it.
We're okay with that. But that continued. In fact, over the weekend, Ronna Romney McDaniel getting hit with questions about, well, why should we vote? I mean, they're still using those Dominion machines that steal votes. What's the point? And so, the classic hoist on your own petard. If you want to try to make the case that those voting machines stole votes, then why should your voters go in and vote? And, of course, we support that altogether. Yeah. But watching the Republican Party try to dance around the fact that Trump has the stench of loser attached to him, while at the same time trying to keep the party together between the nutcases who are now unleashed that think everything is conspiracy and why bother, and they can go back to not voting the way they did before 2016.
Sure.
And the regular Republicans, Chamber of Commerce types, who are trying to pull everything together and run the same old play in Georgia, which is to say, let's make this about the good old white boys running against those people who I don't want to say anything bad, but John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock are together, and neither of them are the right religion. And so who you have to vote for, wink, wink. And I don't know that that's going to work the way it used to in Georgia. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. You can never say. Florida has been awfully stubborn and resistant to change. So is North Carolina. We always describe North Carolina as a stubborn state. Turned out it was. Georgia may be a little different. Texas may be different in time. Arizona certainly was different. And, after Trump, the Republican Party is really going to have to pick and choose about what to do. And it's not so obvious that they will. They're not going to be in the position with, for example, these two Senate races and with actual issues on the table. They're not going to be in a position to say, well, I don't know, I didn't read those Trump tweets. Don't ask me about them. I don't have to comment.
Oh, yeah.
Because, no, now you do. You've got stock issues, for example, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, and you do have to comment on those. And if you don't, we may not vote for you.
Yeah, well, look, I hope it happens exactly that way. And it will be an interesting post-election atmosphere about how to deal with Trump and other crazies and what they're tweeting. I did see a lot of people commenting on that idea that they've spent, Republicans had spent 4 years saying, no, you can't ask me about Trump tweets. I didn't see them. I don't read them. I don't spend time on Twitter. But somebody pointing out all of these Republicans, like the Republican senators, will, of course, be intimately familiar with years ago tweets from everybody who might be nominated to a cabinet or executive branch position by Biden. That there's disqualifying.
I mean, Neera Tanden has been floated as possibly OMB, and all of a sudden everybody's digging up every single last thing from 9 years ago that she may or may not have tweeted. Oh my God, this disqualifies her in our eyes.
Yes. Well, you find there are some disgruntled Democrats, of course, doing the same thing. But she's got it'll be interesting in the age of social media. Well, we've been in the age of social media, of course, for a long time. But during the Trump administration, it didn't matter because they were saying, "Well, look at this one tweeted this and that."
Well, yes, seen it, and I'm not going to look.
Well,
I've got
true.
My eyes closed, and you can't make me open them.
But even if they
the
had
other side of
opened
the
them,
coin, though, is that Biden does it differently.
Right?
Biden doesn't tweet and doesn't pay attention to tweeting.
Oh, well, there is that. I was just going to say
him.
that
this is the time
tweeted something.
This is really going to pay off.
Someone
I didn't see
tweeted
those Neera
something
Tanden stories on Twitter. I don't really care. I don't do Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, weighing what they said crazy on Twitter versus the fact that they, build themselves as a professional ghost hunter at some point was like, well, maybe that's worse than anything that they might have tweeted at some point. And it doesn't make it.
But Democrats are learning a little bit. Here's an AJC story, for example. Ossoff's embrace of Bernie Sanders highlights shift for Georgia Democrats. They're not running away from this stuff, is my point. Go ahead and find the tweet. Who frickin' cares? We're talking about the fact that Perdue's a crook. Let's talk about what I want.
All right. Well, that's one way of approaching it. I don't think Ossoff has any tremendously embarrassing tweets to worry about, but who knows?
He doesn't. But he was talking about the fact when John Ossoff was asked at the tail end of a CNN interview about Bernie Sanders' endorsement, because Sanders endorsed Ossoff.
All right, then the
Senate candidate's answer was unequivocal, and it underscored a strategic shift as Georgia Democrats compete for control of the U.S. Senate in twin January 5th runoffs. I welcome his support. His advocacy for ensuring that health care is a human right in this country, for putting the interests of working families over corporate interests, is welcome. It's necessary. It's appreciated. And so is his support.
Okay.
But 3 years ago, when Ossoff was running to flip a Republican-controlled suburban Atlanta House district, the Democrat would likely have sidestepped the question by saying he was focused on Georgia-centric issues. This is a different race and a different political environment. And that's the point they're trying to make, and I think that's right.
Well, then it makes sense. And what's the problem? We're having difficulty understanding politics that makes sense now after 4 years of this?
Yeah, well, they also point out the other side of the coin. Loeffler and Perdue have no trouble whatsoever to wrap their hands around the issues that Marjorie Taylor Greene brings up.
True, yes.
I mean, they'll go as far right as they need to win, and they don't care, and they're not looking back. But all of a sudden, it's a problem for Democrats because Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Well,
actually, it's not. Bernie Sanders, fine. His voters want to vote for me? Fine. This is Georgia. You need every Democrat to vote if you want to win.
Yeah,
fine.
I don't know what he would be embarrassed about by that, but
It doesn't mean he's adopted Bernie's entire philosophy. It doesn't mean he labels himself as a democratic socialist, but it's not South Florida. And we're not talking about the Cuban population in South Florida. And if you want to associate yourself with somebody who refers to himself, but not me, as a democratic socialist because he's part of the same Big Tent party, I'm okay with that. And by the way, I'm fine with black voters. I'm going to go to a black restaurant and eat a veggie burger, and David Perdue can make fun of me all he wants. He's just helping me get out the vote.
Okay. Well, that's a good posture to be taken. And of course, I don't know. I don't even know who sets up the idea that Bernie Sanders is the same as Marjorie Taylor Greene. But that's obviously what they're driving for. And not true and incomparable. And that's stupid. So, okay, yeah. One person has endorsed him, and he's like a normal guy and a U.S. senator. And the other one is a kook, and I'm glad to be.
You can do, from John Kerry asking for Swiss cheese on a cheesesteak in Philadelphia. You can make and George McGovern asking for a pastrami sandwich with a glass of milk. But you can make a whole story about how politicians try to eat. Yeah. There was that famous, Iowa State Fair.
The corn dog thing. My goodness.
So whenever you go to eat something, this is like standard American politics, and we're getting back to standard American politics, and that's okay.
That's not bad.
It's fine to not have to worry about the fate of the universe every single time you open Twitter and say, oh my God, what did he do now? Now we're just talking about, it's a traditional politician thing where they went and they ate ethnic food in order to try to get out the vote. And that's great.
Okay.
Let's get back to that. Let's just get back to normal times.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, look at that. I didn't realize where he went to eat. How about that? Is that am I reading
Slutty
it right?
Vegan Atlanta.
Slutty Vegan? Is that all right. That's a restaurant name?
Yeah, it's a restaurant.
Well, okay. I mean,
he's got a whole video about it. And thanks for the shout out, Slutty Vegan Atlanta. Let's take this energy and vote. And other people are saying, oh, my God, Twitter be like, no, this will hurt him. He just lost himself the election. But look at the video of everybody in the store just celebrating that he's here.
Happy. Yes, right. Well, they'll be out. But look at they're not embarrassed by this at all. This is obviously part of their marketing play. So Slutty Vegan, that's interesting enough. If you want to call them up, just to dial the number, 855, I guess it's toll free, 855, hey slut. I'm serious. That's what it says right in their Twitter Twitter bio. That's all
Oh
right.
my God! The
I'll
next
take
thing he'll
it.
do is he'll be endorsing, marijuana legally.
Oh no, that's very unpopular with lots of people on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
right.
by the way, just so you know, their favorite popular burger is the Dance Hall Queen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why not? What's on it?
Yeah. The I guess the owners or
Everybody.
the cook is Jamaican.
Okay. Well,
So
I'll take it.
it's great. I mean, so we're just back to normal. We're back to normal people doing normal things, embracing everybody, not being afraid of being seen with this person or that person who happens to be in the same party. It's just you have to go back to when Obama was running, and oh my gosh, he's associated with Reverend Wright. You know what that means? This is good for John McCain. This is like
No.
that whole way of covering politics, I think hopefully, ended in the 2016-2020 years. And although they're trying to bring it back, I don't know how well they're doing it. Who's that? It's good for John McCain discredited reporter whose name I always blank on because I don't want to remember him.
I don't know if I ever really knew who was saying that. I don't know. Was it?
He used to write the note for ABC.
Oh, yes.
And then.
Mark.
Mark Halper. Right?
Okay.
So I think he's doing
two of
OAN
us.
analysis now. I mean, it's like or RT. He wound up on one of these weird fringe stations now doing the political analysis because nobody else wants to touch him. And I think that's just a good comment on how that kind of reporting is just dead. It's just, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, I
So
guess
let
so.
Ossoff go wherever he wants. Let him eat whatever he wants. Let him be with whoever he wants. Let him be himself. It's wonderful.
I think I'm going to enjoy it. I might want to take a look at, maybe you'll want to take a look at their menu and see if there's any other funny name burgers. I love when they have themed names. All right, well, we'll take a look. I'm going to give everybody the link later on to their Twitter account, and then you can find their website and have fun and order up. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I have been through the Slutty Vegan menu, and it's a treat, and you should take a look at it. And if you find yourself in Atlanta, or in any one of two different places, I guess, in Atlanta, or Jonesboro as well, so an expanding enterprise, Slutty Vegan. All right, I'd give it a shot. I'm very interested in the plant-based burger substitute stuff is fascinating to me, and I'm waiting for the
Right,
one
not only
that
that,
really
we want to
hits it.
support small business,
Perfect.
not these.
Sure. So that's true. Here's some
giant
money, and I
chains.
won't eat it. How about that?
This is Small Business Week, right? So
I think it
go
is.
ahead and shop at your small business. I don't know that they deliver all the way to Connecticut. It's too bad, but probably cold by the time we got here.
Sure.
So Aaron Rupert was covering the Donald Trump calling in to Maria Bartiromo.
What did he do that
and
for?
That seems like a random thing to say. It's Monday, so we try to cover the chaos of the weekend in sort of a random way.
Right.
But he was on the phone with Maria Bartiromo, and he said this. This is Donald Trump speaking about the Georgia election.
Oh.
Look at the election you have coming up in Georgia right now. You're using the same garbage machinery Dominion.
Oh.
Trump demoralizes Republicans by suggesting their votes don't matter because the upcoming Senate runoffs in Georgia are rigged.
Well.
And Christopher Ingram from the Washington Post says, looks like the GOP strategy of indulge the president's wild voter fraud conspiracies to keep the base energized for the Georgia runoff is poised to backfire spectacularly.
Cool.
And as they're doing the interview, it's not in person, so they just have a picture of him as he calls in.
They could put a camera
And, the chyron is wonderfully ambiguous.
No.
The chyron on Fox News says, President Trump, greatest fraud in the history of the country from an electoral standpoint.
I think they might have it there.
And I think they might have nailed it. They might not have intended to, but, wow. There's a little resistance going on, even, at Fox News. So that leads us, of course, to that mention of the story that you had in the Washington Post.
Oh, yes.
20 days of fantasy and failure inside Trump's quest to overturn the election. I said on the show, wouldn't surprise me if Trump was wandering around in his bathrobe talking to the portraits. It turns out that's exactly what was going on.
And
Look at
denying
these
that he
first
has the
two paragraphs here. The facts were indisputable. President Trump had lost, but Trump refused to see it that way. Sequestered in the White House and brooding out of public view after his election defeat, rageful and at times delirious in a torrent of private conversations, Trump was, in the telling of one close advisor, like Mad King George, muttering, "I won, I won, I won."
Terrific.
However clear-eyed Trump's aides may have been about his loss to President-elect Joe Biden, many of them nonetheless indulged their boss and encouraged him to keep fighting with legal appeals. They were happy to scratch his itch, this advisor said. If he thinks he won, it's like, shh, we won't tell him.
Yeah. Imagine. We don't have to. But...
So this goes into a weird kind of commentary about, so what happens after he leaves? Because that he's leaving isn't even in doubt anymore. It's not like they'll have to drag him out. He's gone.
Okay.
He'll pack up.
I was looking for that.
So what's left? Well, you have Fox News and people like Maria Bartiromo who have completely tied themselves to Trump, but Trump is attacking them for not being close enough. You have the OAN and Newsmax outlets, which Trump may or may not want to associate himself with. But what happens if he tries to do his own Trump channel and that fails because nobody's interested anymore? It'll just be one of a string of things he's done where he went bankrupt, so that wouldn't be surprising because he's not really a very good businessman. And what happens to these outlets? What do they do? The Bulwark,
Guerrilla Channel,
Never Trump or Republican place, is writing about media parasites. The GOP is a propaganda party, says the piece, and media parasites have taken control of the host.
All right.
Ask yourself, who are the actual leaders of the GOP? Who truly influences Republican voters? It's not whoever the Republican National Committee will nominate as his next chairman. And we'll see if Romney McDaniel keeps her job and whether she goes back to using her regular name. It's not Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell or House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, for God's sake. It's the Fox News primetime lineup, the large galaxy of radio and digital outlets clamoring to place their personalities and stories on Fox News, and the vast array of fringy lower-tier knockoffs. All day, every day, these talkers, writers, producers, and editors set the party agenda. They act as the Republican Party's war room. They give favorite politicians airtime to solicit donations from viewers, like Lindsey Graham pleading on Fox News to help support his campaign. They go negative on their political enemies. Their stars even headline campaign events to rev up the base and get out the vote. And the ones who are good at it get paid far more by the likes of the Murdoch and the Mercer families to carry out the political agenda than any mere senator or congressman. These talkers, not the elected officials, stuck grubbing around, shaking hands and campaigning in the streets, are the party's real leaders. That's why when people talk about Tucker Carlson running for president, I don't get it. It's a far more lucrative gig he has now. True. Why would he give that up?
And no real accountability for any.
Yeah, exactly. He can say whatever he wants and then say, well, it's just my opinion, man.
Yeah. No, it's not real news. Been a great gig.
You don't have to hold me to that. It's just opinion.
They all discovered that. I guess they all learned it from Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh, I guess, ordinarily he would be jealous of this and push people out of this field. But I guess he's, I don't know. I don't know what he's doing in his twilight years. Doesn't have the energy to fight people off on this.
So goes on to say Donald Trump is almost an afterthought in this context. Where's Trump without the glow of the TV camera and his Twitter handle? The only question is what channel and whether he appears on the network owns it or licenses his name.
Yes.
And knowing this dynamic within the GOP, it's no wonder that, to name just one ambitious politician, Senator Ted Cruz has adopted the posture of an online Twitter troll instead of the constitutional scholar turned statesman of the biggest, most Republican state in the union. Well, Texas isn't that Republican. It's not Idaho.
Okay.
And Ted Cruz is hardly a constitutional scholar. He's a lying, two-faced hypocrite POS, so.
Well, yes. That
But, this
sums
is
it up.
conservative outlets, so you got to give him some credit there. It's remarkable to know that Ted Cruz was the second place finisher in 2016 for the Republican nomination.
Yeah, there
which
was
is
a
about as
time
close
when-
as I think he's ever going to get to it.
Yeah, the Mercers were strong backers. They thought they could muscle past Trump. Trump was still a surprise to most of them, and they hung on with Cruz for a long time.
But
And,
nobody likes Cruz.
work.
He couldn't even get a
No.
sufficient second in the Senate.
That's
It's
always
different
the
when a television personality like Donald Trump does this stuff. But just because this way of acting gets you votes doesn't mean that a Ted Cruz can pull it off.
No, that's true.
Right?
You have to be
You
right
have to
kind of
be,
character actor.
You have to be. Psychopaths could be likable.
Yes,
Ted
and
Cruz is not.
psychopaths can be Ted Cruz, the Zodiac killer. No one liked that guy.
Nobody likes that guy. So it's very hard to take the same playbook and pull it off. You really have to have certain things going for you. You have to have media savvy, and you have to be able to make that connection.
Yeah.
And it just what's so odd is the idea that people really are trying to pull off that, oh, well, the billionaire who was the great businessman who got elected was really a man of the people. And Joe Biden, who takes the train back and forth between Wilmington and D.C.,
Yes.
is obviously part of the same elite that everybody hates. And so we, Ted Cruz, my people, says Ted Cruz, are really, people of the lower and working class where the Republican Party belongs. Forget about the fact that I went to
Soup-loving
law school
Americans.
and I went to Ivy League schools and I wouldn't even talk to people in
Right.
state schools when I did my study groups. I am a man of the people. It doesn't work when Ted Cruz does it.
No, and he's too much of a nerd to pull off the Trump bluster anyway.
You have to
that's
like
just not
somebody.
gonna work.
Deep down, you have to say, well, I really sort of like that guy.
Yeah. There
He's-
might be another
Archie
act he
Bunker's
could
kind
pull,
of adorable, in his own way, and he kind of speaks the way I do. Ted Cruz doesn't speak the way anybody speaks, and nobody thinks of him as being adorable. It doesn't work. And the same, by the way, can be said of Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley. These guys just don't have it. Whatever it is, they just don't have it.
Yeah.
It's not that a demagogue can't come along and
Yeah,
show
it
exactly
could be
the
a
same
different
things they
kind
do,
of
but
demagogue.
these guys don't have it. Speaking of demagogues,
Let's do that.
Diana Goldriga dug up these things, which is really kind of scary. This is in the pundit roundup, but I'll give it to you so you can
Oh, all right.
read along with me because it's easier that way, and that helps when Scott puts together the summary later. These
Yes.
descriptions of Joe McCarthy in Frederick Logvel's JFK biography, when you take out the name McCarthy, right?
Okay.
Here's what he said. McCarthy needed an issue with which to revive his political fortunes. He felt sure he'd found it. He was at bottom a salesman, an actor, someone for whom accuracy mattered far less than attention. And he had a talent for imagining subversion and conspiracy and for humiliating the scared and vulnerable. A lazy man, unwilling to do the work required to back up his claims, he relied on illusion and inference. Some people say. But he was also shrewd. He understood the resentment and fears that existed just below the surface in many people, resentment of the elites, fears of the other, and indeed felt them himself. Like all demagogues, he knew that people sought simple answers for why the world seemed to not be going their way. And then this other
heard
piece
of
here,
this.
when caught in a lie, he never apologized or recanted. He attacked his accuser or simply moved on to another target. Talking to Joe was like putting your hands in a bowl of mush.
Okay.
So there's a fellow named
Why
Reedy
is it like
who found the experience of covering McCarthy for the United Press, remember them, UPI?
Yes.
So loathsome that he quit journalism.
That's all right. Well, that was an unexpected direction at the end, but all right. Yeah. Same guy. And, many people point out whenever this comes up, the same advisors.
Yeah,
Right.
Roy Cohen.
Yeah. So,
Right? So, that's where Donald Trump springs from. And Ted Cruz doesn't have that kind of pedigree. And Josh
No.
Hawley and Tom Cotton and all these other authoritarian wannabes. They just don't have it. They don't have that kind of pedigree. They don't have that kind of instinct.
Yeah,
So they
They're
themselves are
famous
elitist and tried to make themselves out as a man of the people. Doesn't work. Whereas Joe McCarthy or Donald Trump, even just by the way they speak, could pull it off.
Yeah. All right, that's true, and they have a problem with the I don't know what it is. Well, Trump had his own brand, and these guys, it's hard to imitate. It might be inimitable. It's just not something anybody else can pull off. They could have different brands, like you point out. You can always have a demagogue, different guy. I mean, I don't know that McCarthy was a Trump. I don't know if that would have worked, or Trump was a McCarthy. It might not have worked to switch them, but there's a formula there. Ted Cruz hasn't got the elements of it, and hopefully neither do the other two guys. Hawley, we'll see, but he's just he's not, no one knows who the hell he is.
And so, by the way, this continues. I'm looking at Greg Bluestein's feed from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Okay.
Has a story, Trump on Kemp, Brian Kemp, the governor.
Oh,
I'm ashamed that I endorsed him. Why won't Governor Brian Kemp, the hapless governor of Georgia, use his emergency powers, which can be easily done, to overrule his obstinate Secretary of State and do a match of signatures and envelopes? It would be a goldmine of fraud and will easily win.
Okay.
It's worth noting, says Bluestein, that there's been silence from most of the Georgia GOP ranks as Trump steps up his attacks on Governor Kemp. This former GOP state legislature is one of the few Republicans who've spoken up in defense of Kemp, who's also not commenting. Absolutely ridiculous, says Alan Peake. Brian Kemp has done an incredible job leading our state during the worst pandemic of our lifetime. I, for one, am tired of Trump's whining. Man up. Admit you got beat. Do what's right for our country. I'll be backing Kemp in 2022. And, of course, these emergency powers are non-existent. They don't exist. He's made up stuff. And there's no such powers conferred on Governor Kemp, says a constitutional law professor, by either the Georgia Constitution or the OCGA.
OCGA. Maybe the GA is Georgia, but
yeah,
OC. I don't know.
Orange County, Georgia. Office of the Constitution. Office of the
right. Right. Constitution, Georgia.
Yeah.
Let's read
Secretary Raffensperger is not only an independent state constitutional executive officer, he's a designated chief elections officer by law. Both have discharged their duties under the OCGA. That's the Constitution of Georgia, I suppose.
The old Constitution of Georgia. Original Constitution.
That Constitution
OCGA, huh?
Got it. Okay. So, he's still going on. But my point is he's still splitting the party by doing this.
Got to find out what this is now.
He's got a sitting governor who's trying to run an election to get his folks elected.
Okay.
And Trump is trying to split the party and say, don't support the regular Republicans in Georgia. Support my people, like Doug Collins, who lost.
Yes, not the OG GOP GA, but the something else. Well, OCGA is Official Code of Georgia. That is a very lame acronym, but okay. That would be their statutory code.
Oh, their statutory stuff. Okay.
Yes. So where we would say USC, U.S. Code, they say OCGA. Of course, it's O. Official. Yeah. I mean, why would I cite it if it wasn't O? Just say it's the Code of Georgia or.
Well, I think it should be ACGA, so you go first in the phone directory.
Right.
Triple ACGA.
Exactly. Aardvark Code of Georgia annotated.
Because we go first. It's so important. Who cares what the A stands for?
Exactly. All right. Well, that is very interesting. Now, let's see. Where were the what you were just reading from was the Atlanta Journal-Constitution?
It was a thread from Greg Bluestein that I'll give you. He's just commenting on stories from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that try to keep up. That's my main source for Georgia information.
Cool. Thank you. Sharing that. Everyone else can follow, too. Okay. Well, I don't know what to say anymore.
Again, so typical crazy Monday.
Yeah.
So let me just finish with the big news, of course, is the pandemic. We've got new information from Moderna on their vaccines.
Can I have it?
They seem to be working just fine. Moderna says new results show its COVID-19 vaccine works well and will seek emergency regulatory okay. That's not CGA. It's just okay.
They haven't done it?
It's okay. In U.S. and Europe.
Good. Go ahead. I thought we were past that, but.
Well, no, that's Pfizer. This is now Moderna chiming in and saying, here's the data. And Helen Branswell, who's one of the best medical reporters on the planet, from Stat News writes, divisions emerge among U.S. officials over when the first COVID-19 vaccine doses will be available and for whom.
Yeah, okay, I can imagine that.
Everybody agrees healthcare workers go first. Part of the question is, who gets it next? Is it the over 65s in nursing homes, or is it essential workers?
No.
Is it
them.
Jobs in the economy, or is it saving lives?
Yes, can be lives.
Because we don't have enough. The head of the FDA center responsible for any such authorization said in a presentation to patient groups last week it may take several days or even a few weeks after the advisory committee meeting before Redfield's office gives the vaccine a green light. You may have heard in the media it'd be a few days. It's possible, said Peter Marks, who heads the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. The remarks by Marks, who did not respond to a request for comment, was first reported by CNN. Separately, Stat has learned that senior leaders in the Trump administration's coronavirus response are pressing for adults 65 and older to be given first access. That approach contradicts the position of a committee that advises CDC, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. ACIP is like a standard.
Okay.
That's what they do when we go along. And they've signaled for months it will recommend healthcare providers be at the front of the vaccination line.
All right.
So healthcare workers on the front lines right now in the middle of an exploding pandemic where your hospitals are overwhelmed absolutely positively have to go first. It's crazy to put anybody else in front of them. The question is who's second. Okay. The conflicting views risk sending mixed signals to public health authorities at the state level who are racing to try to finalize plans for deploying limited doses of vaccines within 24 hours of the vaccines being cleared for the U.S. by the FDA, which the administration insists they're going to do. It's going to be messy, said a senior government official who spoke on condition of anonymity. So here's the thing. If you step back and look at the entire structure of the United States government under Trump,
all right,
what entity would you say has worked the best, most professionally, and shielded from politics more or less?
What? I'm not sure.
Any of the entities in government right now under Trump and say, oh, they're functioning the way they're supposed to.
I don't have any.
I have
to pick one, though?
Well, if you could think of any. I have.
Okay. Yours.
My one is the Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve. Oh, okay.
Right? I
sure,
think they've
probably
basically
true.
functioned as adults and done what they're supposed to do. Whether it's Jay Powell or Janet Yellen or whoever you want to pick, they've done their job.
Yeah, I do see from time to time that I guess they mostly stay out of the news for that reason. But Trump from time to time says, they're crazy. They should do X, Y, Z.
And they just go back and do their business.
Yeah.
I would have loved at this point in time to be able to say, and also CDC, but no.
No, right.
HHS and CDC have been totally politicized. And this is the chickens coming home to roost.
Okay.
Whether David owns them or sells them or bets on whether or not the workers are going to get sick or not. The fact is,
you really can't find much else.
You really can't find much else. I mean, even the Postal Service, which people love.
Right. I'm running through options in my head. What would a crazy administration just not bother touching? The weather people. No, we did that too. Fort Knox. No.
The census. No. I mean, you can't name anything.
That's true.
So now we have a situation where the structure of public health here, where you have to rely on them to make tough decisions and explain what's going on, is tainted in people's eyes, and people really don't believe them. They don't have the credibility that you need. And so what if the ACIP says one thing and Fauci says something else and Robert Redfield says something else and Trump says, no, we're going to do it this way. And Mike Pence makes a rare appearance in front of a microphone without a fly on his head and says, no, we're going to do this because I'm head of the committee that decides these things. And, what do you do? And so it's going to be a situation where, and you can already see it. Just look at your local areas trying to figure out whether or not to open or close schools. Right. These things are always difficult. And one of the things that state and local folks hate is having the responsibility to make these decisions and then have the requirement of going out and explaining it.
Yes.
They hate. And so you can help them by having federal guidelines that are clear and consistent. And so in a pinch, the state governor or the local mayor can say, well, I'm just following CDC guidelines. I'm just doing what our public health experts say. You don't have this now because there's so much conflict about what's going on and so much distrust. And so if you're going to do something relatively simple, not the distribution of a vaccine that needs to be, kept at health reasons over temperatures, but something simple like here's our list of who gets it first.
Yeah.
And already you're going to have people, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do that at my level. And what people have to realize and step back is that CDC has never had we're going to tell you what to do kind of framework that sets policy throughout the United States. That's never been the case. They're advisory. They do it by persuasion. They get on the phone with 50 state public health agencies. But public health is administered at the state level, if not the local level. And so all CDC can do is say, well, here's our guidance.
Yes,
and
but that usually is good enough
to decide whether to do it or not, right? It's more like the Department of Education, another one that hasn't functioned properly.
Yeah,
but the
I get the
point. Education really doesn't have the power to set standards everywhere. They can advise that these are what we suggest, but you can ignore them.
Yeah, but they used to be just so influential.
Like for years.
Right. They used to be so influential and well respected that if the CDC said it, then people would say, especially if they were reluctant to take a responsibility on their own, they would say, well, it's not necessarily that I agree. It's just this is what the CDC.
They must know what they're talking about. Yes, I certainly don't.
Right.
I'm not a doctor.
You're right. Okay, I get you. That makes sense. Too bad we destroyed that.
Now that's been taken away, and so you have, well, who do we look for? So you have a name, Tony Fauci, and I hate putting that responsibility on a single individual. You have the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is pretty staid. It's professional. It goes along at its own pace, and so it doesn't necessarily, reflect the nimbleness that perhaps is necessary in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic.
Maybe they can.
You have places like the Infectious Disease Society of America, which itself has been politicized for years. It's good. It's excellent. But, these are the folks that say there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. And so, there's a whole bunch of folks who don't trust whatever IDSA says.
I see.
You don't have that authority that the state and local people can go back to and say, no, this is what we're doing. And you could see that, and you could see what happens with that, with the whole mask thing, how they don't wear masks in South Dakota, and Kristi Noem is fine with that. We're cowboys here. We don't have to listen to anybody and anything Washington says. We're just going to die, and it's good for you, so shut up.
Yeah, that appears to be the approach.
So what happens if they do that with vaccines now?
I assume that someone will. There will certainly be somebody on there saying that the vaccine makes it worse, or I got the vaccine and I'm sick, so it doesn't work.
Well, we have some stories about that.
Oh.
And in fact, I don't know if I included it in the pundit roundup. I actually don't remember. I have to go back and check. But
we do the digging.
We have places in Montana where some of the public health people are so totally anti-vaccine that they just don't approve of masks and they don't approve of whatever anybody's doing. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see at the local level. And if you don't have a governor who's strong enough to overrule that, you're screwed.
Like Brian Kemp. Yeah, true, right? They're in real trouble. North Dakota, South Dakota, certainly worse than the nation in terms of the number of people or the percentage of their population infected. It's just skyrocketing. And
I found it. It's from the Montana Free Press. How Dr. Annie is dividing the Flathead.
What did you say from North Dakota?
This is Montana.
Montana. It was very, very Northern Plains headline there. I'm sorry. So Dr. Annie,
there it is.
Dr. Annie, medicine woman.
And the commissioners in this county of about 104,000 people appointed Dr. Annie Bukacek to the health board in January. They might have known they were getting into a political hornet's nest. Dr. Annie, as she's known in the Flathead Valley, is a well-known and outspoken opponent of vaccinations. Then, as the coronavirus spread into Montana and the crisis deepened here and across the country, she became a leading voice locally and in this politically purple state against government restrictions to curb its spread. In a widely circulated video posted on social media, Bukacek cast doubt over official COVID death tolls, saying medical professionals were pressured to attribute non-COVID deaths to the virus. In many communities, such as New York City, though, the deaths in the virus are now believed to have been initially undercounted. Many public health experts say historical comparisons show counts nationwide are still underestimating the COVID-19 death toll, but goes on to say that, she's giving local advice that ignore this, don't do that, and don't do this. And there's no strong central, you're crazy, stuff coming from the White House, at least until January 20th, to override that kind of thing. Here's Dasha Burns, reporter, saying, I just spent 3 days with frontline workers at hospitals in a part of Appalachia where hospitalizations have more than doubled, but hospital staff say many in the hard-to-hit communities still don't believe COVID is real and misinformation is rampant. So we have all of that, and then you have the voice of the federal government about what to do with vaccine when it comes, whether it's safe, and who should get it first. And I'm just saying, you really have to get their act together and, give one voice, one message, or many voices, one message, if that's the way you want to do it. But the message has to be clear. So far, they have not done that. They're not the Federal Reserve. And I really worry about what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks before the Biden administration takes over. I know that the Biden administration will do a much better job. Hard to do a worse job. But now is the time where we're having the big spikes. Now is the time you have to get the vaccine out. Now is the time you have to have that clear voice, and we just don't have that. So that's my rant for today.
All right. Don't listen to Dr. Annie. She's no Dr. Action, that's for sure. The one we had in Ohio, who was so much better. And, it reminds me a little bit more of Dr. Gay Hitler, also from out of Ohio. But he was a better dentist than she is an epidemiologist. So it would appear. Wow. Okay. Well, thanks, Greg. That's an awful lot to ponder. In just an hour. You want to do another hour? That's fine. But otherwise.
On Wednesday.
Okay. That's a good time to do it. Yeah, spread it out. We don't want to overwhelm people. Thanks very much for carrying us all the way through. And there's still more to come after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, who knows what direction to go after this. There's so many things I could share with you and so much time I could spend trying to find those things that I wanted to share with you. Let's see. I think maybe Pocket, our most reliable place to start, though much of it is stored in the Twitter feed. Let's see. Oh, yes. First of all, as we were saying, things appear to be coming to a close in terms of the ability to cause uncertainty about the outcome of the ultimate outcome of the election. There's still lots of garbled nonsense that Trump and his team seem prepared to throw against the wall to see if it sticks, but less chance than ever of anything actually sticking. I guess we've Scotch guarded the carpets and do we have Scotch Guard, an equivalent for the wall? I think all the major paint manufacturers are always advertising the things, that the additives in the paint that make it difficult for your kids to stick their mashed potatoes to the wall or to draw on it with crayons. Seems to be working pretty well here. However, there is still one stage left. I did see somebody tweeting out this morning the status of all of the states that were up in the air and where the Trump team, such as it was, were filing their challenges, and it just pretty much everybody has certified or will be certifying today, and I think that kind of closes out all of it closes out the shortest of the longest long shots out there, and now they're left with absolutely just insanity. They can still file for to make small points here and there, but certainly nothing that changes the outcome. And we're getting to the point where, again, according to the rules and laws, which may or may not apply depending on who you're asking, there's just no more opportunity to ask state legislatures to intervene. However, there is one more place where trouble can be made, but I don't think that it really makes there's no dent to be put in the transfer of power, well, at least the transfer of power from Donald Trump and Republicans in the White House to Democrats. A Democrat in some form, anyway, in the White House. I guess the last-ditch thing that they've got that I know of that has any basis in procedure, as opposed to simply we're just asking for a court for this crazy, extraordinary relief that there's no basis for granting whatsoever, but a weirdo judge says yes until an appeals court says no, until I guess the Supreme Court eventually says yes anyway. I mean, that was always hanging out there, but I think their ability to get to the Supreme Court with anything is far more limited than they imagined it would be. At any rate, even far more constrained than I allowed for in abandoning or assuming that even the Supreme Court would abandon all the rules as well. Anyway, there's still the counting of the electoral votes once they're cast in the joint session of Congress on January 6th, and our roster of players is beginning to shape up. I think I originally put money on saying, not money, but, I said, if I had to guess, I would say, all right, well, what are the odds, say, that Louis Gohmert and maybe Rand Paul team up on January 6th to object either to one particular state or all the states or just enough states that it would get to the point where they think somehow Donald Trump would have a chance if they bothered to do any of the math, or whether they just pick random states out of a hat, I don't know, but objecting to the counting of their electoral votes, just based on something they made up. You might know a little something about the procedure. We may have talked about it a little bit. Maybe you've seen the procedure a couple of times, but it's basically it's all pro forma stuff. Ordinarily, the clerks of the House open up the certificates from the various states. The tellers who are appointed to do the tallying, 2 members of the House, 2 members of the Senate, 1 from each party, ignoring even the possibility of third-party representation in Congress because something, it's never happened, so therefore, anyway, or it never happened to in numbers where it mattered if you ignored them, I guess is what it should say. I mean, there's plenty of independents been in Congress, but they don't arrive in numbers that enable them to insist on having a role in the teller process. And they disarm themselves early on by agreeing to caucus with one party or another, and therefore are represented, in fact, by their caucus. So there's always that, in case you were wondering, what's the formal answer to something like that. All right, and they open up all the certificates, and everybody says, there's a whole procedure you have to go through. It's not just assumed. It's kind of interesting just to watch it unfold and say, all right, these are the things that have to happen. Usually I ignore these things and just read in the newspaper that somebody is the president, and that's that. You open up the certificates, examine them, and then announce your conclusion about the examination. Mr. President, speaking to the President of the Senate, who's the Vice President, in this case it'll be Pence. Mr. President, the certificate of the state of Alabama, which I guess will go first, appears to be regular in form and authentic. And as a result, or, in some similar language, therefore, heretofore, henceforth, some kind of crap they come up with, the state of Alabama casts its X number, some of you know it off the top of your head, of electoral votes for, and in this case, of course, it'll be Donald John Trump I think he'll be of Florida this time, and Michael Pence for president, and Michael Pence of Indiana for vice president. And the next person goes, and the next day, and they open them up and they read it, and they just they give them a little speech. There's a little card that says, literally will say on there, you just read it off, Mr. President, the certificate of the state of blank, and I don't know whether they have a card that says state/Commonwealth, and then when they open up the certificate, it'll say Commonwealth on there so that people don't make the mistake of calling a Commonwealth a state. But that's the speech. The certificate of the state of blank appears to be regular in form and authentic. And, the words are just scripted out there, but you see what arises here is the opportunity to say, if you're a jerk, the certificate does not appear to be regular in form and or authentic. Now, in all likelihood, it won't be the tellers saying this because there's only a limited number of tellers. Like I said, one each from each of the parties in each of the houses. So 4 tellers, and they rotate. And they're not likely to be people who would just on their own go rogue and say something doesn't look to be regular, informed, and authentic. If it really does look to be regular, informed, and authentic, they could. But in all likelihood, these people would be appointed by the Speaker and the Minority Leader in the House. And Kevin McCarthy, for all his stridency and partisanship, is not a bold, brave person, and he's not going to likely make Louis Gohmert or someone who would be willing to object to the form of the certificate into one of the tellers. Neither would Mitch McConnell over in the Senate, but there is opportunity, usually at the end of the count, but depending on how willing Mike Pence is to entertain objections in the middle of the count. But at any rate, there's opportunity if you saw either in 2000 or 2004, Democratic members objecting to the count of the electors from Florida because of the way things had gone down in Florida. But you could object to any state or any combination or all of them. And I thought that, okay, maybe Louis Gohmert would be up to this task. And as you may recall from watching it happen in 2000, and both years, 2000 and 2004, House members objecting alone is not enough. They have to have someone from the other chamber agree to sign on to their objection. The objection has to be in writing, right? You remember the lines from 2000 and the Fahrenheit 9/11 and Al Gore asking everybody, is your complaint in writing and signed by a senator? And I figure Rand Paul would be that senator. Anyway, it looks like the lineup might be changing a little bit. This is the first I saw on Twitter. I haven't been monitoring that closely who's been saying that they'd be willing to do stuff like this or hinting. But Mo Brooks on the 27th, and was that Thursday? Let me see. Or was it Saturday? Or is it another day? I've already lost track. So today's the 30th. Yesterday is the 29th, 28th. So Friday. When he should, like all the patriotic Americans, have been out shopping or something, he was tweeting about this. He says, IMHO, you know that, in my humble opinion. He sounds really humble when he does this. Joe Biden did not, in caps, win lawful vote majority in Georgia. Not leaving out any of the articles here. This is how he tweeted it. In my humble opinion, Joe Biden did not win lawful vote majority in Georgia. A lawful vote majority? The lawful vote majority? One of several lawful vote majorities? I don't know, but he doesn't include the article. Per its right and duty, Congress should reject any Georgia submission of 16 electoral college votes for Joe Biden. That is exactly, he says in all caps, what I hope to help do. Mo Brooks, of course, not actually from Georgia, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to have anybody from that state objecting. It could be anybody. He's from Alabama. And really, honestly, in all likelihood, no one's going to object to the first state that goes anyway, Alabama. So he'll sneak his in, and then he'll object to Georgia's. And I don't know whether he plans to object to more than just Georgia, or could be convinced to object to more than just Georgia, but he's going to start with at least Georgia. That's what I hope to help do. He says, see below lawsuit for more, and then in all caps, sordid. This is a very, S-O-R-D-I-D and not S-O-R-T-E-D. That wouldn't mean anything, although I wouldn't put it past him to have done that. But Mo Brooks, excellent vocabulary work. That's good. I haven't taken a look at the lawsuit, but who cares? And as a matter of fact, it's not going to help anything to file it as a lawsuit. I'm looking for, will Mo Brooks object on January 6th or not? And as it turns out, well, I labeled this one and tweeted it back out, just saying, here's our dummy who's going to object to Georgia's electoral vote certification in a January 6th joint session. But I didn't have anything on the record that, led me to believe which senator was going to do it. I just guessed. Rand Paul, he's dumb. He'll do it. And maybe I'm right. Because, let's see, yesterday, Rand Paul started tweeting his conspiracy nonsense around. So here, I think, is our Senate dummy who will co-sign Mo Brooks dummies objection. He's tweeting yesterday, let's see, both of these tweets, of course, flagged by Twitter as nonsense. Interesting, he says, Trump margin of, quote, defeat in 4 states occurred in 4 data dumps between 1:34 and 6:31 a.m. I don't even know exactly what he's alleging. Like, did it happen at the same time in 4 different states, or just within the range of 1:34 through 6:31 spread out across 4 states? That's not coincidental seeming at all to me. But he says, statistical anomaly? Fraud? Look at the evidence and decide for yourself. That is, if big tech allows you to read this, which it does, but it does just say that the claim is disputed. And then he attaches some stupid analysis, alleged analysis of this. I'm a little bit interested, but I just don't think that clicking through is going to clarify anything. I'm a little bit interested in exactly what he's talking about. All I know is that Donald Trump spent the weekend, along with a couple other people, calling into TV shows and talking about his massive dumps, which I thought really was, that seems like it's going to backfire on you, sir. I don't know that that's the takeaway you want people to walk away with here when they hear you speaking, is talking about massive dumps. But apparently that's the way he decided to do it. And I guess the heart of the theory is that, again, it's the same old theory recycled over and over again, that in the middle of the night, even after Trump led in the vote count in all these 4 states, whichever the 4 states are, all evening from 8 p.m. Eastern time through midnight, then all of a sudden, in come all these Democratic votes from out of nowhere in one big dump, which is, what we all expected, because the live in-person vote at the polling places would be counted in regular order, thanks to these the manipulation of the process by Republicans who refused to allow certain states to catch up to Florida and others that count, or at least prepare everything but the counting of absentee ballots and early votes, so that you can avoid these stupid-looking anomalies that aren't even anomalies. But anyway, okay, so in come votes that are later counts, and they reversed the outcome of the election in some of these states, as everyone expected. And we'd all been, all normal people had prepared to anticipate this. And, okay, so this is fraud. I don't know. I'm not certain whether he has anything more interesting than the generic claim always was or not, but it's making it look like the lineup will be Mo Brooks. I still think Louis Gohmert will be a part of it, plus Rand Paul. Will they get more than that one senator? I don't know. What happens if they do get it? Ultimately, nothing. They would split up and send back to the 2 chambers, and the Senate, in all likelihood, would just come back having rejected the objection and just say, no, move on, get on with it. But I don't know, if they rally the troops over there, worst case scenario, the Republicans say, yes, these objections have merit and we should XYZ. And there's some flexibility in what you will do at that point. Count all the rest of the electoral votes, send it the electoral votes of this one state to the some extraordinary committee. I don't think that you could do it in one house. They'd have to form a new ad hoc joint committee, I suppose, for study or whatever. But in any case, the House, presumably controlled by Democrats, would reject the objection, and you would have disagreement between the House and the Senate as to what to even do to settle the issue. And then I'm not really sure what happens, and I guess part of it will depend on what the parliamentarian advises Mike Pence he can and can't do, and how comfortable Pence is going outside, if at all, of that advice. And I guess, most people have jumped all the way to the conclusion already. Let's say they deadlock and they can't figure anything out, and nothing happens, and January 6th passes, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, all the way to the 20th, because they can't change anybody's mind about the thing, and they're still deadlocked. The term ends for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and they haven't settled the electoral vote count. What happens? All right, then there's no president, no vice president, no legal basis, no constitutional basis for installing Biden and Harris as president and vice president assuming that the Congress has, somehow validated these objections or failed to resolve these objections in such a way under Pence's direction that Biden and Harris aren't simply installed anyway. And what happens? Well, then, of course, the statute of succession just hands the presidency presumably to Speaker of the House, who will in fact be Speaker of the House. Nothing that we can do to stop that, absent some other crazy event, meteor hitting the Capitol or what have you. Nancy Pelosi. So what's the problem, right? Nancy Pelosi ends up president. Well, it causes disruption and problems of its own down the line, but okay, at least it would be a Democratic president. So what's the worry? Minus the entire country is in upheaval. There's still 99% of the country still hasn't heard anything about the fact that the secretary or the Speaker of the House would succeed in that to the presidency in that situation. Who knows how comfortable people will be with it. There's been years and years of propaganda against her in much the same way that there's been years and years of propaganda against, or was, and still is, against Hillary Clinton. Not to mention the leadership upheaval in the Democratic Party. Democrats would be in disarray, despite the fact that they would be occupying the White House, which ultimately, I guess, is the big worry that everybody has. So, do Rand Paul and Mo Brooks and Louis Gohmert and any of the other dummies that you could think of, maybe the brand new dummies from QAnon, could join in something like this? Does it make any difference? Would they bother with it if they knew that it would just end up being Nancy Pelosi as president anyway? Perhaps. And you might think that would talk them out of it. You might think they love chaos. You might think that they thought that they could manipulate the process somehow and make it somebody else. Or, what if they're actually like strategic-ish thinkers after all, and they think along the lines of, well, we're going to get a Democratic president anyway, so that doesn't make much difference to me, whether there's one Democrat or another. They're all vampire pedophiles anyhow, says Marjorie Taylor Greene. So what's the difference? I'll sign on and I'll do this thing. And if it's Nancy Pelosi, good, then we're rid of her in the House and I don't have to deal with her. That's another person I don't have to answer to my lunatic constituents about not murdering. And two, it sets things off in the House internally inside the Democratic caucus, like on a very practical level. Who's going to be the next speaker? In all likelihood, well, you know how we predict these things, money and leadership pacts. That means, especially on short notice, Speaker Steny Hoyer. I'm not that unhappy about that, given that, the country almost collapsed, but we came out of it with the President Pelosi and Speaker Hoyer. Well, then people will be like, well, Steny Hoyer in 1995 voted against, oh, God. Take what you can get, right? But it will cause a great upheaval. And, of course, we settled all these things with elections just recently, but then I would set off more elections, and some of the people who just moved into the number 4 slot will now be eligible to run for the number 3 slot, and the previous number 3 will run for the number 2 slot, and et cetera, et cetera. So it would really cause a lot of upheaval, and they might just be happy with upheaval or anger among Democrats. So why did it have to be Speaker Hoyer? Why couldn't it be Speaker someone else? And for various reasons. So it might be well worth doing, from the perspective of, I don't give a crap about anything. And I'm also a crazy idiot. And I like craziness and idiocy. So you never know. Anyway, keep an eye on these idiots. They might cause a lot more disruption than you think. And I just don't know how it comes out. And I guess I should also say, don't get too excited about it either. If you find that interesting or dramatic or something, like I'd watch the hell out of that show, but, it's bad news. On the other hand, there's also a chance, and maybe even a better chance at that the two houses, well, I mentioned that they could break up and the Senate says, get out of here, you idiot. No, we reject your objection. Everything's fine. Biden and Harris, no problem. House agrees. We're both in agreement. Shut up and move on. But supposing they don't do that on the Republican Senate side, or, don't also forget that there's the possibility that by January 6th, we have a pretty good idea. They won't have arrived in Washington with their certificates of election yet, but what if the two Democrats as they should, win the 2 runoff elections in Georgia, and it's a 50-50 Senate instead. Well, okay, they won't have arrived. But, if they're at stalemate, and that might be a good reason to keep things at stalemate, although the motivation to keep things at stalemate so that the 2 Democratic senators arrive probably just, there's no reason for Democrats in either chamber to say, yeah, let's intentionally drag this thing out. That would be bad, and wouldn't put you in good stead with the president either. But leaving that aside, if for whatever reason they still disagree, but Mike Pence is advised, let's say, by the parliamentarian to say, in the event of deadlock, I mean, that's the decision to make, right? In the event of deadlock, what does this mean? Does the objection prevail in the event of deadlock, or does the objection fail in the event of deadlock? I would imagine that the parliamentarian, for various reasons, would simply say, in the event of deadlock, the objection fails. The objection must affirmatively carry both houses in order to have any effect, and it hasn't. And so therefore the default answer here is Georgia and every other state that was objected to has their electoral votes counted as planned. Biden's the president and Harris is the vice president. Why is that the decision? A number of reasons, not the least of which is that it's the least disruptive of them all. But that's sort of that's very common voting rules, right? A tie vote doesn't win the contest when it comes to passing legislation in either house or whatever. And there's no tiebreaker as between in disagreements between the House and the Senate. People say, well, doesn't the vice president break ties? Yeah, in the Senate, but not as between the 2 houses. So they may just very well say an objection that seeks to upset the normal order has to affirmatively carry, and it hasn't, and so it fails. The objection having failed, the answer is that Georgia's votes are counted and they go forward. So very, very little chance of it coming out the other way. And I'm sure the parliamentarian would in all likelihood advise this. Now, does Pence follow the advice of the parliamentarian? That is not guaranteed. However, I'm not certain what happens then, because if you're getting back into the joint session and you say, well, the House has rejected the objection and the Senate has approved of the objection, we don't know what to do. The parliamentarian says that means the objection fails, but I'm the president of the Senate and I'm also presiding over this joint session, and I say the objection carries. Someone will say, they'll object to that and bring up a point of order and say that's not the way it's supposed to be. And I don't know how that's settled. I've never seen anything like that, and I don't know if the joint session has any power to vote on anything, but maybe just in this one context they could. And then what? I don't know. Do they vote? They wouldn't vote as state delegations the way they would in choosing the president if the electoral college is deadlocked or no one achieves a majority. They could break up into both houses again, but then you just have the same problem over and over again. I don't know. But if somebody then objects, I guess I don't know. I really don't know what the procedure is. There's no voting in joint sessions. But supposing they decided to have voting in joint sessions, I don't know how they would handle it. Every member gets a vote. 535 votes are cast. And I presume that Democrats have a bare majority of the 535, but by virtue of the House being so much bigger than the Senate, they might try to go to state delegations. I got no idea. And I guess that's the real problem. But I don't know. And so Pence says no to what the parliamentarian says, and somebody objects. And what's the point of an objection if there is no voting mechanism in a joint session? It's a big hole that appears. And so I don't know. To me, it sort of seems like the sort of thing Mike Pence would want to duck out of. Quite honestly, I think maybe his preferred outcome in that situation is F it, let's get out of here, and I'll either retire from politics forever and forget the whole damn thing, or run for office as a regular mainline Republican in 2024 for the presidency and say, for the good of the country, I did the right thing. And if that works, then nominate me. But who knows? We'll never know whether it works or not because Mike Pence is too boring a figure to ever really anticipate seeing as a nominee for president. So it's more likely that people will reject him because he was boring than because the party is crazy and hates people who do the right thing. That too much speculation in that. But anyway, I thought we'd run through all those stupid scenarios just in case somebody brings it up. It could be awfully exciting, and I don't think any of it goes terribly wrong because a Democrat ends up in the White House regardless. But what a mess. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. All right, so let's see, catching up with various other things. So that was kind of a run-through of all the dumbest stuff that could possibly happen. Anticipate something a lot less exciting than that, I guess. And, points off for me for discussing how exciting it could be to have this total threat to the integrity of our democracy for fun, like a spectator sport. I'm as bad as all of the traditional media reporters in that respect, but in no other respect. So let's see. I'm still awesome on balance. I don't know. I'm trying to redeem myself here somehow, but I don't know. It feels like part of our role to explain, at the very least, if not what could happen, and the worst case scenarios. But I guess it does pay off to explain the process a little bit so that when you see it happen normally, you can be happy and excited about it working normally and learning about the process and the majesty of procedure and the law, that we don't just declare people, president around here. There's a real a path to it, and it's supposed to be verifiably enshrining the will of the people and consent of the governed, and there's a real serious process that helps ensure that that's recognized, even if most people don't watch it. I guess there's a related story out there that I could pick up on, and maybe I'll now threaten to do that. Along with the theme of the Thanksgiving weekend, and in the interest of not having to play catch up all the time, every time, with thanking our donors, although it might make a nice Thanksgiving feature each year. I thought it might be a wise idea to keep up with new donors as they come in, and there were plenty. And by the way, I guess I should also say a very large number of you, well, it's not very large, but a large number of you, more than one of you, and so therefore large in terms of how much space it takes up in my inbox, have very generously responded to our discussion and thanks over the weekend by increasing your pledges and donations via Patreon and whatever other platforms you might choose to use. We thank you very much for doing that, and I always appreciate it. And the fact that you would hear a plea for new donors and respond by saying, I will do more, is greatly to your credit. But in terms of new donors, people who have come on since then who have not yet had the opportunity to hear their names on the air, I think we might have left off right after this one here. And so I don't know whether we had a chance to welcome a new patron, Kim Word, but we've got that one and another brand new John Marzolino. welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for joining in. And thank you again also to all the people who upped their pledges. And I guess that's a whole other framework. And I don't know whether we can commit to naming all the names again every time. Well, I mean, I guess if they go up very regularly, that will notice and we'll say, hey, thanks to all of you who did that. But thanks to all of you who have boosted your contributions. And I guess there's probably a good 10 or 12 of you who've done that. And it's quite amazing, and I appreciate it. Let's see. Other things, though. I know you came here for other stories beyond hearing your names read, but apparently that was very popular. And so I'm very pleased to have done it. My pleasure, I can say, in all honesty, to thank everybody for doing that. That's nice. It feels good for me, and I like the fact that you kind of liked it, too. That makes it all worth it. And I don't know, gratifying in a way. All right, other stories, though. I mentioned that there's other process stuff. And here, I guess we got to go digging in the Twitter feed, because I don't think I put this one aside. However, I have seen this question posed before. I think I kind of ignored it the first time. There was so much other stuff going on. But the question was forwarded to me via Twitter again, and perhaps it deserves a little bit of discussion if I can find the damn thing. I saw it again yesterday afternoon, so it shouldn't be too far down here. But I guess somebody has been opining that their reading of Senate rules and Senate precedents indicated to them that there was something that could be done to break the stranglehold that Mitch McConnell, as majority leader currently, depending on the outcome of these races in Georgia, that he's got on the Senate. And it's not at all clear that this is a real opportunity. I guess I got to look for the tweets and replies here. But and once I find the thread, I'll be able to tell you, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to credit them for it because I think they've made a mistake here, but at least we can, we can read it in their own words at the very least. But okay, the thought was, while I'm looking for this thing, was that, okay, well, the power of the majority leader in the Senate is generally recognized to be that of the ability to set the agenda for the Senate, to decide essentially what will and won't be voted on. Here we are. And I guess the question this time was posed to me by Susan Nelson, who asked me and a couple other folks, hey, I'm wondering what some of the Senate experts think about this. And then this was directed towards two actual Senate experts and then me. but okay. Actually, as it turns out, the two other Senate experts are former Harry Reid aides, and I think as between the two of them, they would probably say, well, we're the real experts in Senate procedure, but he's pretty good too. We know him, and we would be interested in his answer. So here's how it's put here. Let's see. She's forwarding the work of. Look at this Twitter handle. Is this I am sysop, like a system operator, SYSOP? Is that where it comes from? And a follower on Twitter. I don't know whether a regular radio listener, but okay. I am sysop, I guess here, points up to this theory. As president of the Senate, it is said here, Vice President Harris, eventually, right, could give any senator priority recognition. That senator could then decide on all legislation that is brought before the entire Senate, and this would change everything. This is actually in the middle of a tweet thread. It's number 4 of a longer tweet thread. So I suppose I should start at the beginning of this tweet thread. I'll do so first by cautioning you, no. This ultimately, I think, does not work. However, according to Article 1, Section 3, Clause 4 of the Constitution, and it will say this, the Vice President is also the President of the Senate. True, I think. I mean, it does say that. I think they got the citation right. I didn't check whether it's really, in fact, Article 1, Clause 3, Section 3, Clause 4. Probably. Correct it if it's wrong, but it does say, of course, the President is also the Vice President is President of the Senate. The Majority Leader, this also is true, is not a position that exists anywhere in the Constitution. That is true. That's something that they created for themselves. Speaker of the House, constitutional position. It's named in the Constitution. Doesn't say anything about what it's supposed to do or why that person is powerful, but that comes from parliamentary rules. Anyway, no mention of majority and minority leader and their roles in the Senate. That's just something they did for themselves in the Senate because they had to. We ought to operate some way, and the Constitution doesn't say how. So these are the rules we're going to adopt. And it then points out, I think also correctly here, the reason that the majority leader has, they say, I wouldn't call it this, near dictatorial powers to control floor votes is because of a tradition, yes, that dates back to 1937. Maybe, I don't know, but it sounds plausible. The tradition is that the vice president gives floor leaders priority recognition. Most notably, this is not a rule in the Senate. That may or may not be true also. And I think that might, in fact, not be in the rules, but rather in the precedents. Then points to some authority for it, which is good. Read the below article on the actual written rules and why the majority leader is so powerful today. Unlike the House of Representatives, the most, at most of the Senate rules. Well, most of the Senate rules. Let's just get rid of the A. Unlike the House of Representatives, most of the Senate rules are tradition, and McConnell will gladly tell you tradition is not written rule. And the link is to a, ledgebranch.org, which I don't know exactly who's responsible for that URL, but what makes the Senate leader so powerful article, which I clicked through, read on, and that is largely accurate. I don't think I have very much reason to disagree with that assessment of what makes Senate leaders so powerful. The short answer, aside from reading that article to you, is that Senate leaders are powerful because they have spoken to their caucuses and conferences, in the case of the Republicans, been elected as their leader. The rank and file of those parties essentially trust that person as their leader or agree to trust that person as their leader. And they are subject to replacement at any time if they, cause enough unrest and, what should we say, disgruntlement among their rank and file. But it has to be fairly significant in order for that to happen. But they do have a constituency and they can be voted out. But the general agreement is, look, we'll back you with votes to negotiate on our behalf what the floor schedule is going to be. Anyway, skipping back to what I.M. Sisop is concluding from this article, as president of the Senate, Vice President Harris could give any senator priority recognition. And here I guess we should stop to explain. What gets explained in the article is that, if I think they're right, and I think this article verifies it, 1937, John Nance Garner, I guess, is vice president. And I don't know in what context, but at some point he establishes the precedent that as president of the Senate, whoever the presiding officer is, your job is to decide, all right, which senator of several, if it's the case, who are rising and seeking recognition from the chair in order to be recognized to take the floor and speak, which one should I recognize? And it would be wise if there was a rule and it wasn't simply the whim of the presiding officer, right? A good reform. That way, you get some idea of what to expect, and there's some sort of semi-rules-based system for determining the outcome of that question if more than one senator rises. And so basically said it'll be like this. The first priority, if there's a conflict, if two senators have risen at exactly the same time, if one of them is the majority leader of the Senate, I will recognize that person preferentially. If the majority leader doesn't rise, but two other senators do, and one of them is the minority leader of the Senate, I will recognize him instead. If the majority leader and minority leader both rise, I'll go with the majority leader. If the minority leader and some schmuck from Kentucky should rise, go with the minority leader. If a bill is under consideration, if the manager of the bill for the majority should rise and neither of the two floor leaders rise, that person is next. If the minority leader of the committee of jurisdiction on this bill, or whoever's the minority bill manager, should rise and no one else does, there's the recognition. After that, it's kind of, well, there it's wide open. I don't know. I don't think they even have, they might have something somewhere, but who cares about, the seniority of the two or whichever. But I think it might even be up to the chair to say, all right, well, I'll recognize you and you. And if it gets out of control and people are like, oh my God, the presiding officer, the president pro tem is being a total dick. Help us. Well, either the majority leader, majority bill manager, minority bill manager can help you get out of that by saying, all right, I'll rise and I'll yield time to people who are being ignored by the jerk in the chair. It regulates itself. Anyway, apparently that's what Garner came up with in 1937. It's worked since then. And so, as the article explains at great length, what it means is that if the majority leader can rise at any time and get preferential recognition, he can do things like bring certain bills to the floor, even over the objections of others, by either first asking unanimous consent that it be taken into consideration, but if there's a fight over it, you won't get the unanimous consent, but you can also make a motion to proceed to XYZ bill or piece of business. And presumably, if you are a majority leader with the consent of your party, who have agreed to back you with votes, and you are the majority party, you will be able to simply muscle anything you want to onto the floor. Even if the motion to proceed is filibustered, you should presumably be able to break that filibuster. But if you can't, well, then that's the power of the minority. Currently, under current rules, I think we could probably change that, but we haven't gotten there yet. But the point is that with a majority behind you, you can effectively control this thing. It's not dictatorial power. It's power that's granted to you by the consent of the governed, essentially. In this case, you just happen to have the majority, and that you run roughshod over the minority is just one of those we have more people things that we agree to as a basis of our voting procedure everywhere. Except, of course, in selecting our most important executive officer. But that's it's a story for another day. So essentially, it's not dictatorial power. It's that the majority leader is backed by a majority of the votes. And so you get preferential. The key to it is your preferential recognition gives you the ability to jump in front of the line and make the motions to proceed first. And that essentially means you can control things. But it doesn't mean that the minority leader can't make motions to proceed. And I think later on in this thread, they say, this has happened before. Schumer has risen and made motions to proceed. They typically lose because he's the minority leader. And in the contest of the minority against the majority, when it's just votes, the majority will win. So anyway, you get the idea. It's not dictatorial and it's not arbitrary. It makes sense. It's a manifestation of the recognition of how many votes there are in each party. And for the sake of sanity and getting things done and not wasting your time bashing your head against the wall and losing vote after vote, people allow this to happen. But what happens here in this analysis is we just fantasize a little bit too much about, well, what happens if we break free of tradition / recognition of the reality of the numbers. So where we picked up in the beginning, we'll start off again here. As President of the Senate, Vice President Harris could give any senator priority recognition. They could, in other words, say, I refuse to acknowledge the power of precedent here, and I won't give priority recognition to the majority leader. I'll give priority recognition to the minority leader. Or if you don't like Chuck Schumer, I'll give priority recognition to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, or whoever your favorite Democratic senator might be. Can she do it? She can make that decision and rule that way. Does it result in the senator that she recognizes having near dictatorial power over the setting of the Senate schedule, despite Mitch McConnell's apparent power and his position, and despite the Republican majority? No, that would be too good to be true, but it would be also anti-majoritarian, which is not a huge problem in the Senate necessarily, but they're not set up for this one. They're only set up by rules for the filibuster one, which is different because it is in the rules and it's not tradition. So, okay, I am Sysop then continues here. Without McConnell to hide behind, the moderate Republican senators would be forced to, if they had to, right, vote down every cabinet member, bill, resolution, and more. And that's not immediately apparent as a benefit because that is what they plan to do. I don't think they're embarrassed about that. But I guess doing it out in the open seems like it would be, I don't know, there's not much to hide behind. But I guess what they're saying is if McConnell could keep all those nominations and good bills off the floor, then they wouldn't have to be casting public votes against those very popular things or nominations, assuming they are popular. And so that's the preferred position of a senator. But if they had to vote against them, they probably would. But anyway, without McConnell to hide behind, I guess they'd have to vote against all these things and more. Without McConnell, anything even remotely popular with at least 2 senators would pass, even getting a cabinet assembled. And I think that we don't have very much authority for it, and I don't even know exactly what he thinks he's talking about on that front. But let me move on here. Also, this wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened. And yes, well, there's the possibility of rules changes. They cannot change the Constitution. At the end of the day, Madam Vice President Harris is President of the Senate, period, not Mitch McConnell. And then he says, this article was originally retweeted by John Cooper of John Cooper Tweets, who's also a follower on Twitter here, and can be found here, and it's in a place called Newsflector, like News Reflector maybe, but newsflector.com, under the title of How VP Harris Can Sideline Moscow Mitch. It's fun and all of that, but no, essentially this is not how it works, and you've heard the explanation sort of along the way. Susan Nelson asked, I'm wondering what Senate experts think about this, and that was my answer. Not much. The vice president ultimately could certainly decide, of course, as we said, to recognize any senator that she wanted to, but that senator would only be able to do what? Move to proceed, make a motion to proceed to some bill or other business, which would, of course, then be subject to a vote on that motion. And if the majority, which at this point is still Republican, says, no, that's not what we want to move to, then you don't move to it. So if you're in the minority and you get recognized with priority recognition, you probably lose your motion to proceed vote, and then what happens? Now, you could continue recognizing other people who you like, but whose motions to proceed won't pass. But eventually, you kind of get the message. We could continue to do nothing, but I don't think that's what the Democratic caucus in the Senate was really looking forward to either. And I mean, after all, there is opportunity to amend votes or amend bills once they're on the floor in ways that sometimes works out for the minority if they can work out some sort of compromise position. But this is we're in extraordinary times, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't just leave the Senate paralyzed because none of it ends up, of course, creating a parliamentary war, and Republicans end up digging in their total opposition to everything. It's not so much that we're worried about pissing them off, but it just doesn't answer the question, right? And I'll also remind you that you could eventually see a fight about this recognition itself, right? If Harris just continues to do this, and McConnell and Republicans are pissed, and they're like, the old tradition was that you recognize the majority leader first, and they're not doing it, and it's pissing us off. You could see Vice President Harris, I don't know that she would go along with something like this, because she'd probably figure this part out and say, yeah, that's not going to work. But if she did it just to show everybody, I don't know, and she recognizes a Democrat instead of Mitch McConnell, Mitch McConnell or some other Republican could say, by the way, point of order here. A couple parliamentary inquiries first, I'm sure, but eventually a point of order contesting the vice president's choices in recognition, because there are precedents that exist. There is this John Nance Garner thing from 1937, and precedent means something in the Senate, and you could ask, what happened to that? Now, she might say, screw that precedent, I'm setting a new precedent, that you're allowed to do that, but of course, there's an opportunity to vote to overrule the decision of the chair and to refuse to establish this new precedent. it's just basically a nuclear option type maneuver over something that doesn't matter quite as much as the filibuster did. But, maybe it does if you're just talking about the entire idea of priority recognition. But okay, you could eventually question that, and then what happens? Well, there's a majority of Republicans, and they say no. And the precedent isn't established, and the John Nance Garner precedent remains, and the parliamentarian says, that you can't do this. Harris could continue to do it anyway, but just nothing happens. In other words, there's certainly no way that this procedure that I can see ends up in someone other than Mitch McConnell being able to actually bring measures to the floor reliably, because there's still a majority in the Senate that are Republican. Now, if that changes due to the Georgia situation, well, then other things happen. And you might be wondering what happens if the Senate is tied 50-50. I understand that Vice President Harris has the ability to break those ties, but what do we do with, who's the floor leader and who are the committee chairs, and how do we make up the committees, and how do we split things up? If it's 50-50, you might think, okay, well, we'll have, we split all the committees 50-50, but who chairs it? Well, we could say, they rotate. That's something they could land on, but there is precedent for this stuff in the past. It hasn't been that long since there was a 50-50 Senate. It's well within living, working memory. And, there's precedent for that. I don't have to follow that precedent, but I'll note for the record, if you want to read a little bit about that, the Washington Post, Paul Kane has a piece from the weekend, I think, yes, maybe even Saturday, right? Awaiting Georgia runoffs, U.S. Senate and its committees have been plunged into uncertainty. Let's have the horror dramatic music for that. Uncertainty. We're all, afraid of uncertainty, something like that. And not to worry, we've been in this place before, and they know how to settle it. And also, I should point out, the Senate failing to come to a conclusion about who will be on what committee and what the ratios will be for several days in January before they actually settle things with an organizing resolution is not unprecedented either. They can afford to wait until the outcome of the runoff elections is known. But Paul Kane puts it this way. I'll just give you a smattering from the beginning here. The presidential transfer of power began last Monday when President Trump allowed the incoming Biden administration's teams access to federal agencies, maybe. But another influential transition will remain in limbo into the new year. The Senate's usual perfunctory task of approving an organizing resolution, creating new majority ratios on legislative committees, and installing new chairmen where necessary, remains on hold because of Georgia's 2 runoff elections on January 5th. Georgia's elections officials could take a few days or even up to 2 weeks to declare winners in the state's 2 U.S. Senate races, given how close the presidential contest and the 2 initial Senate ballots were. And there, of course, you see the key phrase in there, 2 weeks. You got to look out for that anytime. 2 weeks and Trump appear in close proximity to another. By the way, I don't know if you saw this one over the weekend, but with respect to the vaccine distribution, right? Even Trump actually 2-weeked the vaccine, which really set me off. He's, when will people be getting the vaccine? Soon, very soon, perhaps 2 weeks. Oh my God. That means there's no vaccine. According to the rules of how to read a Trump comment, I'm not certain what to do with that. But anyway, yes, it could take a while to determine the winner of the Georgia elections, maybe one, maybe both. That means Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will be in a bit of a standoff until there is clarity about which side will hold the majority. And with no new resolutions setting up the Senate committees, the panels will remain in their current form for however long it takes to sort out Georgia and then reach a compromise on the new makeup of committees. That freezes in place the expected game of musical chairs, as at least 9 committees are slated to have new Republican leadership next year if the GOP keeps its majority. That is true. And effective at noon on January 3rd, when this session of Congress ends, yes, the 3 committees will not have anyone to wield the gavel, as the current chairmen are retiring. Those headless committees will not be able to conduct any business or call confirmation hearings for cabinet nominees or hold hearings on new legislation, because only the chairman can take such actions. Until the organizing resolution is done, they don't have any authority to do anything, said Marty Paone, who spent almost 30 years as top parliamentary advisor to Senate Democrats. They couldn't even buy paper. The oddest quirk will come on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, where Senator Lamar Alexander, the chair, is retiring, as are two other Republicans on that committee, Mike Enzi and Pat Roberts. Until new senators are appointed to the panel, Democrats will actually hold a 10-9 majority. That's true. I actually wrote all that out, wondering about whether or not it would be wise to put a hold on the organizing resolution pending the outcome of the January 5th runoff if Mitch McConnell sought to do otherwise, but I think he sees that the writing is on the wall there. We'll probably continue this discussion in the next couple of days just because it's interesting, but just wanted to make you aware of that. That was out there, but we have been through this scenario before, and sometimes it's taken a week to 10 days to do those organizing resolutions, and it's not bothered anyone. It doesn't usually happen that bad at the beginning of a new presidential administration, because they know they have work to get right down to. But it'll happen this time, and it's not anybody's fault. It's those two runoffs. All right, well, at any rate, we'll hand the things over, the reins, if you will, over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. Stay tuned.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, obviously, too much for me to list here that I didn't get to, that he will get to in his program. We'll have to save our favorite stories for later in the week. And now, just to give you a change of pace and a perhaps better perspective on what's truly important to the rest of the world, Justice Putnam, please take it away.